We were about 15 minutes into the first counseling session following my coffee with the group when my counselor stopped the conversation, looked at me and asked, "Did something happen to you this weekend? You seem different. More relaxed. Less prickly. And you are partially responding instead of completely avoiding discussing issues that you've been uncomfortable talking about." I told her about having been dragged from the gym by the group of 5 and the long discussion with Tony. "You like her," she said. "This is the first woman you've mentioned encountering in a social setting since we began meeting. Are you going to see her again?" "Whoa. I see her most Saturdays at the gym yoga class. We had coffee as part of a group and she had some more free time than the rest. That's all. You shouldn't ever play poker. You have a tell when you're trying to divert the conversation from something you don't want to talk about. There's more to this than just coffee and yoga, isn't there? So, I repeat, are you going to see her again?" "Well, we did discuss possibly meeting for coffee the next weekend she doesn't have her kids. Maybe go up to New Hope and walk the canal towpath for a while. She likes to hike. We might have lunch while we're there." "Does she know anything about your history?" "No. I just told her I had some serious emotional issues and was in counseling for them." "When are you going to tell her?" "That depends. Maybe never. I'd only share that with a woman if I were trying to form a committed relationship. I have no idea whether she and I will go anywhere at this point. You, of all people, know what a mess I am. Would you want your sister or daughter dating me in the shape I'm in right now?" "Fair point. We'll revisit this in a couple of weeks. Now let's talk about the other major issue you're avoiding." And with that, she once again launched into the question of my finding and reconnecting with my children and my siblings. It took several sessions of somewhat acrimonious back and forth, along with a phone call from Maureen, before I finally agreed to hire a private detective to locate my parents' graves, my siblings, and my children. I asked him to prepare 3 separate reports, one for each search, so I could decide what to do about the search results for each separately. I was sure I'd visit my parents' graves, less sure whether I'd contact my siblings, and quite unsure whether I'd contact my children. For the search results on my children, I asked him to give me a report on how they were doing but put their location and contact information in a sealed envelope so I could take my time in deciding what to do about outreach to them. He agreed to do so and went off to begin his searches. The Saturday spent in New Hope with Tony was delightful right up until the last 2 minutes. She had me pick her up at her house. We walked along the tow path for several hours, then wandered through the town watching the show that is the hippie haven of Pennsylvania. Lunch was excellent, which was to be expected as most of the restaurants in town were quite good. By mid-afternoon she was clearly beginning to flag. I suggested that it might be time to call it a day and take her home. Tony seemed reluctant for the day to end, but agreed and we headed off to her house. When we got to her house, I got out, opened her car door, and extended my hand to help her out of the car. She stood, then placed her hand on my chest. "Would you like to come in for a few minutes?" "Are you sure that's a good idea?" "Just for a few. I've enjoyed today so much. I really hate to see it end. We could have a glass of wine and just sit and talk for a while longer." I agreed and we walked to the front door and then into the house. I had barely entered her house when I realized that I'd made a terrible mistake. Her entrance hallway was decorated with a collection of pictures of her children. There were more than a dozen photos and photo montages, arranged more or less chronologically. I hadn't been confronted with children's pictures since leaving prison. A tidal wave of emotions washed over me. All I could think about was my loss. I began to cry, then said to her, "I'm so sorry. This was a mistake. I really must leave now. Thank you for the day." And I bolted from the house, got in my car, and drove off. At my next counseling session, my counselor asked me, "So how did it go? Did you see her on Saturday like you planned?" I did. It was fine until I took her home. Then I blew it completely. What happened? We walked into her front hall and it was covered with pictures of her kids. I just imploded. I broke down completely, pretty much just ran out of there and drove off. I don't think she'll want to see me again after that. Have you talked with her since? No. But you have her number? Yes. So why won't you call her? What are you afraid of? She has a family. I don't. I can't begin to explain how much it would hurt to be reminded of that every day if I were to be with her in some fashion. What's the worst that would happen if you called her? That she might not want to see you again. You've already concluded that she won't. What if she will? Isn't there a potential upside benefit with no downside risk at this point? As it turned out, I didn't have to call Tony. She called me that evening. What did I do? She asked. Nothing. It was all my fault, I said. I told you I had emotional issues. When I saw your entrance hallway, with all the photos of your children, I just lost it. Do you have children? I did, but not anymore. It's a part of that past I don't like to talk about. I'm sorry if I hurt you, but seeing your children's pictures just reminded me of what I'd lost. I couldn't deal with it. I understand that you won't want to see me again. I'll transfer to another yoga class if it makes you uncomfortable. She was quiet for quite a long time after that. Then she said, "Look, I like you. You are the first man I've been attracted to since my divorce. I'm willing to take this as slowly as you need to. I don't want you to change classes and I definitely want to see you again. If you're willing, we'll limit our meetings to public places that don't trigger you. I've had some patients with PTSD and other, similar, trauma-related issues. I don't know what you are going through specifically, but I recognize the symptoms generally. I'd like to help you get through this and see if we might develop into something. Could we at least try it this way?" Now I was quiet for a very long time. Tony finally asked, "Are you still there or did we get disconnected?" I replied, "I'm still here. I think I'd be willing to at least try your approach. My counselor was pushing me to call you. She said there was upside potential in making the call and no downside to speak of. I think she was right. You called first, but I was planning on calling you when I worked up the nerve. Do you think we might meet for dinner some night? We could. I have a regular babysitter and I'm sure I can arrange for her to watch the children while we meet. Would Wednesday evening be too soon? I'll meet you at the Italian place in the strip center next to the gym. That would be fine." And with that, I began the very slow process of rebirth.